All right. So the first video I'm gonna play for you guys is actually a really interesting one to me. Diana sent this girl um maybe a week ago or so to me, and we had a whole conversation on her. And I want to give you guys the backstory of what she told me. So when you watch it, like some of the same like initial thoughts may happen. So she said this girl is super, super strong. Like she can muscle through a bunch of weights. She's newer to CrossFit, right?
Yeah, I think she's been doing this for like a year. This is her
Okay.
second open, so a year and something.
I would still say like if
She's
you're a
new.
year in, like you're
Yeah,
still newer. Like I just think of stuff back to the stuff like what did I know in a year?
yeah.
Really not a damn thing. Besides like what WOD meant now and what AMRAP meant type stuff, and that it hurt. So I would say she's still very raw. She's still very new. She's very strong. I think that's a consideration here. And Dee was telling me, with the moves, she kind of like takes and doesn't move super fluid. And Dee was like, is it maybe a core thing? Is that why she has that wobble going on? Because that could be, I think that was a good diagnosis from Dee, because, that could be a sign of like the core's not activated or needs help, especially when like a bar is overhead. So I'm going to play this with those thoughts through, and then we'll kind of talk about it. We'll talk faults after. You guys have any initial thoughts?
I like her timing of hip drive first.
Yeah, that is there. It's a really good notice. I had two thoughts. My first thought was like her bar path's pretty good considering she has a hat on forward, which is kind of funny. That was one of my first things. And I was like, take the hat off. Um, I had more of like when I looked at her move, more of a psychological thought, like more of a mental thought than anything movement related, right? Like watching her move is watch this first rep especially. I think that was my cue off to like what I was feeling. It's like a tempo, right? Like she's very careful the way she lowers. She does a great job considering that she goes right into the dip and goes into the next rep, but she's like cautious. I would almost say in lowering that bar. So my first thing of looking at her was one, just tell her to relax. I think she's a thinker. She looks like she's overthinking this movement a ton. And in doing that, she's still being like particularly cautious in her movement. Like, you know how when you get a new person and they go to do anything, it's like they go real slow. They go real slow into their first back squats. Or, in a push press, very dynamic movement, especially if you're touching and going like she is. But she's almost like doing this tempo down. So it tells me she doesn't have the full confidence to take the governor off and let it rip, even though she's very strong. And even though she's still newer, but she does have like a year or so experience. That was my initial feelings. I like this video because I think it brings me to a point that like coaching is 100% physical and making changing the way people are moving so much, but it's also like looking at this and identifying the psychological and like seeing people that are maybe thinking too much as they're moving too, and like diagnosing and coaching that side of things as well as like drive through your heels on a push press type. Can you guys kind of see that, like when I play it through, like why I kind of came to that conclusion? And then D, share what you told her today and what the reaction was on the chest to bar.
So we had because I noticed it wasn't only with this movement. I've been coaching her for over a year, so like I noticed that she kind of shakes a lot in a lot of her movements. So taking in mind what Nate told me, I just told her like in her kip swing, we were doing chest to bar and she was kipping, and even in her kip swing, you could tell she was like all wobbly and shaking. And I just told her to relax, to let herself flow in that kip. And as soon as I told her to just relax, she wasn't shaking. So I do think it's psychological with her, other than like she has to improve some of her movements, of course, but I think it's more psychological
As
than
we
it.
all do, you know.
One
Yeah.
thing, just like seeing that, I remember that my coach, when you used to do push press or push jerk or push press, he would go like tempo down and up, and then it switch it like go fast on the deep and then slow on the dry. So like you get both, and then the last one, okay, make it fluid. So like let's make a warm up on this one, warm up on
Kind of
switching, and
like
then follow.
piece little elements to like the entire movement. Yeah, I think for her, like the biggest cue off for me was that Dee was like, this girl is strong. You know, so I'm like, okay, if she's so strong, like what are the odds that she's dumb strong, but then also like she's wobbling when she's overhead because her core's weak. Like if you take the core completely out of the picture and she's that weak, like it's gonna be really hard, I think, for the limbs to operate at their speed, or I shouldn't say at the speed, at the strength that they can without having a foundation, basically. Uh, so I really do. I think like her flowing is going to be confidence, and like you just like telling her just relax a little bit on the kip swing. That can go a long way. I always like compare it to like real sports. You know, we're being fluid. If I'm playing baseball and I am at bat and I'm thinking of everything I need to be thinking of. It's like what my weight distribution is, the way I need to rotate at my hips, the way I need to throw the bat at the ball. You know, is it going to be a fastball, a changeup, a curveball, a slider? I'm going to strike out. Like there is no way that I can be fluid in my reaction and have that cat-like reflexes with the thoughts. Like those brain waves can't move as fast as a 90-mile-an-hour pitch. We're not doing that in CrossFit, but in a sense, all the drilling, all the coaching, the year of experience prior, her body knows how to flow through a push press. Let it go now. You know what I mean? Like, so when it's a new person and they're going slower, that's fine. Let them go that slow. But like when someone's like starting to get some experience under their belt, they've had a lot of coaching and they're still in the mind frame of like, I need to be careful. Like start to feed them the confidence that like they can go. Like trust yourself. They've got that muscle, that muscle memory and all that practice happening. And that's like my baseball swing. I've had all the batting cage, all the tee. I have to just let that be what it is when I'm at that now and I'm going. And in a sense, like in a WOD, that's what we're doing. Obviously without just throwing things out of the window, but I don't see that with her. That person that is being cautious isn't going to do what the ex-Navy SEAL that wants to beat everybody in class is going to do, kill themselves to do it. They're not going to have that same response and going too fast that things fall apart. Any statements or questions or like anything on like that confidence, more psychological part of this movement? Let's look at the actual movement itself. A couple things we could fix. What's like maybe the first thing you would jump on?
I would say just to stay on her heels a little bit longer, like dip straight down.
Yeah, I think she has a couple dips that are like pretty close, and then as she gets tired, the dip goes more forward, I would say.
Yeah.
And you know what's funny? As she gets more tired, do you notice the speed of the push press actually goes up and she's letting gravity work? Because she's just getting to the point that like fatiguing.
Gotta get over with it.
She can't tempo anymore. And I think that's why she shakes. Like when you're doing a very slow strength or when you do a plank and you're about to fail, you get that little shake going. I would address like her dip too. Her dip, and I think it also coincides with her getting toesy into the heels. Looking at the dip, because I think that goes hand in hand while she gets toesy. What's something you could tell her that may correct the forwardness of the dip, but also the heels of happening?
Maybe to push her knees out a little bit.
That's exactly what I would say. I would address what's happening with the knees Because if I drag her through, right, her shoulder blades are in front of her hips, or her hips a little too far back. Her knees are in front of her toes, which I'm not saying that's like a fault, but what I am looking at with that is that her knees went straight forward. I want them to go like a diagonal, like a V. So I want them to be pressed out. If she presses those knees out, it's going to allow her to stay upright much easier. And it's also going to put some more pressure in the heels. So that's where I would initially go with this.
So,
Hey.
sorry. So like what would you do first though? And would you do the confidence first or would you do the heels first?
I think you can do both at the same time, personally, because like trying to build the confidence thing. One, I don't know that that's just going to be like a light bulb switch that happens. Like it could be, but like that's something that like you're not going to scream at her while she's moving. Like that's more, I think, of like a conversation like that you had like when she was kipping and you were like, chill out. Like was she actively on the bar and changed while you said it? No, it's probably when she was like
It was-
off.
Yeah.
And then she jumped back up and applied it. So I think
Yeah.
it's more of like a conversation
Okay.
piece, essentially,
Yeah.
because it's also not like
Right.
a short actionable cue. That's a hard thing. Like if I scream out, be more confident to somebody, that can be taken, I think, 500 different ways. So I would still address and coach her movement, even though that was a conversation that happened. I would just scream out to her, push your knees out when you dip, and I would see what happens. I think that may correct it. And then the other thing, there may be one more thing that you have to say to her is I think as she gets more fatigued, Jose, I'll let you go and say what you want in a second. As she gets more fatigued, her dip starts to get like a hair deeper.
Yeah.
So it also may be becoming a factor is like she's going too low and going too low that anatomically she can keep her torso completely upright. So I would say push your knees out more when you dip. And if that doesn't happen, stay shallow or two. Two very actionable directional things that can happen. And that's while she's moving in a metcon. And then obviously, you know, if we have to step it up and do a tactile and grow from there, we do. What were you gonna say, Jose?
No, but I think that those two things fix it. The knees out and be shallow. I was seeing that she rocks on her feet when she grabs it, she goes like back and forward, back and so like. But if you go like think about your knees out, then you will get to your feet flat and then just heels
Gonna kind
up
of like
instead of.
gonna kind of like push you in place because like that's a really good observation. While she's moving, she does. She gets her weight back in her heels. Like she's not that. I know we've seen this or been that person when they get toesy and then they stay toesy and they start to like hop forward through the gym. Like she's not doing that. So I think she does have pretty good awareness about like distribution in her feet, whether it's conscious or subconscious. And then when she does go toes, like look where she's at. She's in the bottom of the dip. So I do think like what Dee's saying, like push those knees out. I do think it has the potential to just go, I fixed, and check them off. Other than that, her bar path's pretty good. It looks like for like her having a hat on forward, it's kind of like impressive. Like if I look where that bar's lined up, like it's maybe slightly in front of midfoot, but it's still pretty midfoot. It's still, I don't know how she does that. I would have hit my hat off. That's my party trick when I coach sometimes to impress people. Everyone goes, oh. Especially on a muscle snatch, you look really cool when you do it if you do it right. So I mean, other than that, like movement's pretty good. If we take the dip out, like Justin said earlier, her timing, especially toward the end, she gets better. Like there you see it. It starts to rocket because she's getting tired. So her timing, I think, was a hair early to start, but she corrects it as she's moving anyway.
Yeah, she knows.
So I mean,
She's
if she ripped the last 5 reps that were good, like I'm not even gonna talk about timing. I'll do the knees, and then if she starts doing it again, it may be the next thing we work on. But you know, I think too, like when we have people in class and we're working on something, it's just like when we coach. We're gonna focus on doing one thing better, right? And if I do that every time I work out or every time I coach, like you're gonna become very good. So it's like we'll focus on the knees, and then if she's just absolutely rocking that, I'm gonna give her that good feedback, that good reassurance, then we'll go to timing if she's still having trouble. You know, got definitely like. Okay. Let's stay on the press train. I got another press for you. This one. Pretty sure this was a push-up, if I remember right. And I think the last set, and I think a PR.
Oh, that's push press.
I did not mean to pause that perfectly on this. I was just gonna compliment the way he approached the bar. He has a full grip, and even though in the video we can't see it, he has a full grip. That bar is on the shoulders, and those elbows are in front. I think the only thing we may tweak, but we can't really see, is he could probably even afford to drop the elbows a hair down and out, just to be in that pressing, the slightly better pressing position. But like the way he approached and the way he is there, you can tell where they're at. I really like. I wanted to say that. And since I accidentally paused it right when he did it, we'll just go ahead and compliment that dip too. Torso, beautiful.
Upright.
Yeah.
Or
I think that's a great example of like when we watch movement and we see something and we're like, I don't know. You're probably seeing the negative that you're saying I don't know about. Because then we look at that and I look at his shoulder blades and I look at his butt. There's no I don't know. I'm like, nice work. So that's a good example of when you think you're seeing something, you're probably seeing something.
Is this the same guy that squats directly
This is the
down as
squat-
well?
This is the squat funny guy.
All right.
I'm gonna
This
tell him
makes
that's
sense.
his
He's
new.
good at this, and he's not doing the squats correct.
Yeah, it goes hand in hand. I'm gonna tell him that's his new nickname. Oh, never mind. Let's take all of those compliments back.
I was gonna say, like in that first little dip, he wasn't gonna do the movement. He did start with his knees.
I was like, that's beautiful. Hell yeah, dude. And I did not
No.
realize that was just an adjustment. Let's look at the full movement. If that was his dip and drive, I love it. Maybe the knees could get pushed out more, but I love it. Let's go to the real thing. That tricked me. Push press wasn't a push try. All right. Since we're on the topic, great example of comparison there. Right? You look at their shoulder blades, you look at that hip, that is a torso forward. Right? We don't love that. So I think same potential cues we used with that girl, but if I look at his knee, it does look like he's pushed out. It doesn't look like he's pushed forward. So what would be the cue for him since he's already doing that?
I mean, he is dipping pretty low as well.
Stay shallower. Yeah, that's a pretty low dip. It's just getting to the point where the butt now has to shift back because the way the human body is built.
But
So don't.
like, aren't you supposed to push your butt back a little bit? Like you're still initiating.
So
you're still initiating with your.
That's a great question. So when we're doing the dip and drive of a press, the hip does have flexion, but the hip is not going back with flexion. It's like you're sitting your hip like in between your femurs.
Yeah.
So the initiation is like a knee-based initiation. The hip does flex because if the hip that's on a push press, push jerk, if the hip doesn't have any flex, then we have a muted hip, right? So if I stood tall and I only bent my knees, I'm gonna lean backwards because my hip is 180 degrees open, right? So the hip is gonna sit like this is how I imagine it, between the legs, and it does have flexion. As it keeps flexing, there's a point in time where it has to shift backwards. He's hitting that point in time there. So like there's pretty good, maybe slightly. And then you see how he falls more forward. Does that answer your question good?
Yeah, it does. It's just like I understand it, right? But I remember a few months ago, we were looking at a push press, and I was saying, I think we were looking at somebody that was coaching, an L4 that was coaching the push press. And I was saying, but why doesn't she say, you know, like Santi says, initiate the movement with your knees? And then you were like, no, because that's not how you actually do it.
It's that is like gonna be, I think it's a way to do it, but you have to know immediately that I need to be looking for a muted hip with that, because the person that's
Right.
like very literal, they're gonna like
Right.
lean backwards, right? So when someone squats, right, we had the conversation that the initiation happened at the knee. Their hip still flexes, right? It goes into flexion, and then as they go deeper, it has to go back more. So it's still happening there. But if I tell them to initiate at the knee, most people are going to have some hip flexion. They're not going to take it solely literal and keep their butt squeezed. So it's I think a strategy to use, but it's not exactly like what's literally happening. I don't like the cue because I don't want to say I don't like it. I like it on certain people. It's not the way I teach it, because I've had people have that muted hip. I like to say, like, you're going to scratch your back on a wall like a bear. You know,
Yeah.
a bear scratch your back on a tree. To me, that works really, really well. Or I tell people, don't burn your butt. If there's a hot wall behind you, don't burn your butt on the wall. You have to dip and not let your butt go back. And that usually works really well too. But there is hip flexion happening. Right? And if you're unsure, just stand up and only bend your knees while keeping your butt really squeezed. And you'll realize real quick that doesn't work well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
But
think it's a
like,
very unnatural thing to do in the dip and drive of this.
Yeah.
Happens all the time in a clean landing.
but like for L4, like if I were to go to my L4, I wouldn't say that, because that would be wrong. Or they wouldn't think that's,
My actual answer to that is I would go read in the L1 what the verbiage says exactly. And then I would make my decision off of that. I don't know. I would really think about that one. You look that up while we keep going. You got your book right there. I think I would talk about the dipping with the torso remaining upright
yeah.
before I cued somebody on knees. Fuck this extension. I like that. Great job with his timing and extension. Like, he is there. There's one more thing that I absolutely hate, and I yell at him every time, and I coach him every time. And when he doesn't do it, magic happens, and when he does it, he usually fails, even though he got this one. You can tell by that expression too. Definitely a PR. What's one more thing you guys see? Like a rainbow with that bar.
Oh, yeah.
You can see the unpacking of his like thoracic spine and that extension there. And like, if you know, it's hard in real speed because you can't freeze frame and see like the distance that thing away from him. But I mean, that bar, that head should have tucked out of the way, and that bar should be relatively pretty close while passing the chin. But he unpacks, he gets real hyperextendy, and he loops. Let's watch the finish. Like, look when he's almost locked out. That bar's over his forehead, and then it has to shift back, and he has to get the head through to get like over the crown more. So that would be like, if I had to address something, I would probably address the dip and drive first, and then I would start to address that bar path. Those are his two big things on this push press. Anything you guys want to comment on that? And D, did you find?
It says initiate the dip by bending the hips and knees while keeping the torso upright.
So terminology is they're acknowledging that there is a hip flexion happening. Yeah, because I mean, if it would like say just bending the knees, and I'm taking that as literal as can be, like it's position that's not going to work.
Yeah.
I had a question on this one, Nathan.
Sure.
So I was curious if the bar path issue may be related to either it could be his head's getting jacked so far back that it's causing thoracic to extend. But it could be too, like he doesn't have the shoulder mobility. I can't tell based on this press if it's his head going so back that it's causing that
So
caving.
I wouldn't say Hunter has like the most mobile shoulders. I don't think it's a shoulder issue. It's more of a thoracic spine mobility that I would say. He's definitely not the most flexible in the thoracic spine. So I think that comes into like play a little bit when he goes to get the head out of the way. He doesn't just get the head out of the way. He gets like the entire upper body out of the way with the head. So it's probably very related to that. And then also like with this dip, there is forward inclination happening. So it could be partly tied into that as well, because everything's already that way. You know, that bar propels off slightly that way. And then you add it into, you know, what you're noticing that the shoulders are flexible, but the thoracic spine's not super flexible. You add that into it, and then it becomes this big bow root cause, you know, from those two things. So I do think that is a factor in it. I've seen him move a lot. I've also coached him in moving. I've seen him have a straight bar path, so I know it's there from a just like mobility, flexibility standpoint. You know, me knowing the athlete a little bit better.
So, but when you're going to like a max load, I feel like that's like very common for people to like bend their torso that way to try to get it up. And I know you're supposed to try to coach them to not do that, but it's almost like it's hard to avoid when you're going to a max load.
It's a tough coaching spot.
Yeah.
Because you want the person to PR, you want them to be stoked and be happy. But then you also don't want the person to get so egregious that you're now just like violating threshold training and you know the mechanics that should be happening there.
Yeah.
And I do think there's like a time and place for both. Like in his case, like was Hunter going to get hurt here? Very low chance. I don't think he was compromising himself a ton. If he was one of these people that I've seen it shoulder press and push press, and they like go to shoulder press and get like a push press, and they're not going to get it, and they're about to like let it crash on their skull. That's like the like we're not breaking down our movement to that point just so you can PR today. Like so, I think it's like going to be like a coach's discretion thing on like, is this going to be okay that he goes for this or has another attempt? Or like, are we really like, this is a bad idea? And
Yeah.
you guys have been in CrossFit groups plenty to know like what I'm talking about when I say, is this a bad idea? If we get a max lift in the open this week, I promise you that example is going to be on display in every single gym across the world. There's going to be someone that should shut it down because they're not going to the CrossFit games and they are going to put their heart and soul into some clean. And you're like, I don't know how his back's been through. Is it worth it? I don't think so. Not to be 20,000 in the world because you got an extra 5 pounds, 100K. So I really think that's a coach's discretion thing. And like, that goes back to also culture of your gym, culture of those coaches, like setting the tone of like, this is how we do things. Like we are going to be here to have fun, get a great workout in, but we're also going to work on our movement and move well. So we have a lot of longevity with that too. So I think like, that's just like a pie of all sorts of stuff coming in on how you're going to address and handle that. That's a good question statement. Let's go one more press and then Justin, you're up. I have some lifting videos. Did we do this split jerk? No.
I'm not sure.
Sometimes it's hard for me to remember because I'll watch videos and then like I'm like, did I just watch it or did we do it?
I don't think so.
I'm pretty sure this is a split jerk. Let's go with that. Let's see if my memory.
Yeah, it is, because I remember you telling me to add more weight.
What jumps out? I know, Jose, you made the face I probably made when I watched it. What jumps out immediately? Kind of like, all right, nice. Well, pretty stoked with that. Where I really like it is like athlete shows a lot of confidence getting under the barbell, which when we start to talk about Olympic weightlifting, like you could be real deadly if you've got some speed under the bar and you've got a lot of confidence under the bar. So I love that. There's also some really good things happening when she gets under as well. Like she gets the head back in place, everything gets stacked really nice. Super stoked with that. So that's like a hell yeah, good job. You kind of moment. Like in class, like I'm gonna give some kudos to that, and then I'm gonna start to get a little more particular and a little more judgmental at like, let's go through this with a fine tooth comb. I'm about to replay it. Let's say you're coaching class, you saw that, you're like, hell yeah, good job, fist bump, whatever you do. She's about to go again. What are you gonna look at? Because we know looking at the macro of this, everything looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy. So now I've got to go to the micro of looking. What's something you're gonna focus on? Billion right answers here.
I'm starting with the feet and working up from there.
Just going up for there. So let's do that. Let's look at her feet. Is it perfect? No. Could we do something better? Yes. She could be a hair more back in the dip.
Yeah.
Right? She's a little toesy in the dip, so let's address that first. I think that probably the push the knees out cue that you had earlier, you do pretty well. Let's stop you. Okay, so you do the knees out really well. But if I stop this video, look at your shoulder blades, look at where your butt is. So this may be your initiation. You push your butt back immediately. Like that little bit of movement, the knees break and the butt is breaking. I think it needs to be like, have the thought that you're gonna sit your butt more in between your legs when you break. So I think the toesiness, the feet that Justin's looking at starts to go to the root cause of the dip. The torso has a slightly forward inclination there, right? So like even looking at the feet, I would have looked at the dip because I think they're correlated. We both kind of got to the same root answer in a sense. Right, so that's that. I didn't mean to hit pause. All right, so let's say we address the dip and the feet and we fix that. And like, I'm gonna go to the next thing. I would probably look at timing. I don't think that's an issue just based on how she's going, right? Let's say that's good. I'm gonna go to the next thing. She's getting ready to do another lift. Sorry, that was too soon. I'm gonna now look at like the landing and where's the landing? Can that be better? What do you guys say?
My front foot, like my heel came off the ground for a second, but I think maybe, see right there?
Yeah.
Maybe,
And there's like a little balance thing. Like it comes off the ground and you also like you're about to adjust your foot because it's real, you can
Right.
see the weights in and you're about to lose balance, but you don't quite lose balance. So maybe finish your statement.
maybe that is because I already dipped a little forward.
Yeah. I think so. Give me more to that. Go
I have
ahead,
some
Justin.
thoughts too. Is that from the very beginning, from the dip, that she's just slightly leaning forward as she goes into the press and she receives it slightly forward, and you'll see it. She pulls it right back, and that's her coming back onto her heel as well. So she's like maybe like an inch forward further, and
Like
I think
right-
it's the initial dip.
Yeah, like look where she's at there. Like look at the shoulder angle, look where the bar is above the head. And then look where she's at
Yeah.
there. It starts to, she gets it a little more overhead. And that's like, if I had two sets of eyes and I could watch the foot and watch that, that's probably when that weight thing happened. And then she
Yeah.
saved this when that bar moved back, dude, like
Yeah.
that much. Like it's so slight. So I think you're very spot on with there's a forward inclination there, torso's forward, we're in the heel, or
Like
the balls
following
of
the
our
bar.
foot. It ends up just a hair forward here. And like when I look at the balance of this spot, the bar's a little forward. And then if I look at this lunge, if I took a barbell out of your hands and I gave this picture and I'm like, write a caption, I'm gonna be like, Gianna's performing a walking lunge. It looks like you're moving forward, right? It doesn't look like you're lunging in place. Like if we only had this in a still shot, so like you can see the forward momentum because this leg is so loaded up. This leg would maybe have to be a hair more flexed to
Yeah.
be more 50-50.
Yeah.
I would say you're maybe 60-40 or 70-30 there. And it's
Huh.
all stemmed from like that same first forward inclination. That
Yeah.
bar's forward, so your shoulders aren't totally open and everything. This is a great example of like watch it in class. You're
A
like,
micro,
"Ooh, yeah.
macro,
Huh?
a macro,
Yeah,
micro, back to macro.
great example of that, and just great example of like if everybody's on this rig split jerking, right? And I see that, and I know that this girl back here is not moving that well. Like all of my focus starts to funnel to her, and all I give Deanna is a really nice job, good work. But she's been CrossFitting a long time. We got to take those little tiny things out for her to like hit another foot split jerk PR. You know, unless she just got way stronger suddenly. So it goes to show, like, even though this is such a good moving, a really good example, we still got things to coach, still have value to give her as a good mover, you know, for this. And I think overall, like, if you look at the speed under the bar and like the confidence that's there, like we got the hard part done. That's the hardest thing to get people to like get really comfortable with in a splitter. Overall, nice job, but like putting the seasoning
Mm-hmm.
putting the seasoning on the lift and just making it that much better. I think too, when you say like, is that perfect? Or could we make that better? And you start to ask yourself those questions, like it gives you the answer on like, what do I need to cue and say?
Mm-hmm.
Justin, do you remember what this is? Is this a clean or a deadlift?
I think it's like a clean complex. No, it's not. I can't recall.
Yeah, it's been on here a while. Keep meaning to get to it. I have a couple like that. I've got an initial thought. Of course I do. If you're watching Justin move, right? And he's very mindful for his setup, very mindful for this. Like everything is like this super deliberate thought process, in my opinion, of just watching this that goes on. Would you kind of agree with that, Justin? That you're really thinking of where you are in space and time the entire time?
Yeah, I overthink it too. So
yeah, this looks like to me the first girl we played. That she's thinking where she's at, she's overthinking it a hair. I would like initially, like nothing that you're doing here is like gonna concern me as a coach to be like, oh, I need to fix that right now because it's gonna be a risk. So like I kind of want to get you to flow through this a little bit more. Not that you have to go fast. Like I would want you to still pause here, still set your angle, but like take the governor off and let yourself flow through it. I think would be my first like thing. That makes sense? Because you've also been moving a long time, like the girl. So it's like this isn't a brand new thing to you. Like you deadlift and you clean plenty of times. That would be like my first thought there. And it's the deadlift that cues me off the most on it. Like you are so deliberate.
Yeah.
Let's like take a very close look at that. I'm gonna play just the deadlift and then I'll kind of drag it through. Couple things I really like about it.
I think that was nice.
Super deliberate with the deadlift. I also like that, like when you look at him in this position, like it's not just a flat back. I actually see like what the natural S curve is, right? So like everything is set very, very well. And if we do our deadlift checklist and I go heels, you can't see him well, but I don't think it's forward at all. You go heels, yes, I love it. Is that back set in the way I want it? Hell yeah. Are the
Yeah.
shoulders slightly in front of the bar? Absolutely. So like if I use my cheat code on deadlifts checklist, this is great. I like it. I also like that he has like eyes forward on it, but he's not looking across the room. I'm personally not a fan of twerking the neck like that. I like a little bit more of a neutral neck. So I even like that for my own stylistic. That's more of a stylistic powerlifting approach there.
I
So
like that.
love that. Hips and shoulders,
He's still over the bar.
definitely rising together,
Yeah.
right? So they're rising together. This is like, it looked a hair funny to me, but if you actually look, he's going a tad faster with like the shoulders in the back than the hips. So I would just maybe like to make it that much better, and I think where that would play in is on like a very heavy deadlift or like a very heavy clean. Think about being like in a block of ice and pushing through the floor longer on that, Justin. Do you guys see what I'm saying there? It's so slight. Like it's literally, if I look in like the center of his back, I can tell that's working more than his press through the floor. See how he starts to open just a hair? Yeah. Like look at his torso angle there. Look at the torso angle there. Would you say that's more open by a tad?
Yeah.
That's like what I'm looking at. It's a good job because they are like going together. That's like a really fine tooth comb. It could be maybe better. And like the only reason I'm thinking that is if I give Justin a workout that has 60 deadlifts in it, or like the open workout we just had, that's going to be a really high volume of deadlift. That slight inefficiency could start to make his back a little tight toward the end. Like it's not going to be the end of the world, but it could be an efficiency thing later on. But generally, he is moving together. Besides that very very small nuance, and he is pretty patient. It happens a hair early, but he doesn't try to open until he's cleared the knees, which I love. So really, I think overall, pretty nice job there. Let's look at the clean. I would say just a hair more bow, just a hair. I think it's like the old lift your legs not back, and like that's how you start to descend. Like you break the knees versus like more of a hip hinge there. We want the more of a hip hinge to happen.
Like more of a good morning than.
Exactly, more of a good morning. I'm gonna play that real speed through again. Sure. This bump on the hip extension, that looks pretty good. Let's slow mo through there. Little elbow bend, but like you were jumping, which I like. I like you're using your momentum there. Maybe arms could stay straighter, just a hair longer. Bar path's great. Do you feel like you think about getting under and you have a hesitation?
Absolutely. It's like
Yeah.
something I went lighter. I've been going lighter recently so I can try to stick the landing and be confident as opposed to trying to ride it down so much. And I can see it here in the base of the squat. Like I just get all wobbly and stuff. I'm like, that's kind of like I need to work the isometrics at the end range and get strong at that base squat. And that's something I'm
I
working
can
on. But yeah,
and I
I have
can
zero.
see it like so you do something really well here. Like the bar propels up, right? And it's let's call that at like a chest level because you're starting to get under already. You make the bar phenomenal. So like what I like is that you're not like waiting for the bar to crash on you in a squat because you have too much confidence. So I like that. So like I don't even want to call like riding the bar down. Like I don't think you're doing that terribly here. Where I can see is the elbows. It's like you get them through, and then all of a sudden they're able, like when you start to get there and you're like, okay, I'm good. They get high there. It's like this little bit of like, oh, okay, I'm good now, and they just go up a half an inch. That's where I can see it.
It's like I'm preparing myself to bail out, so I don't want to take my elbows all the way
Just
up.
in case.
Let's
Yeah.
keep it here, just in case.
It's like your own personal insurance plan that's happening with them. Muscle cleans can be really good, even though you're not getting under, because they're great when you have a close bar path to really feel the transition on your shoulders and get them high fast. Like you get into a very, very solid rack with the elbows where we want the elbows to be like with speed initially, and then start to put it through like a power clean and build on that. So that way you can allow yourself like mentally to have the speed of like, let's get them through and committed. And like, is a muscle clean super scary? No, I'm not like getting under like that. And you don't have to go super heavy because you don't want to like start to want to lean back. You can stay very light with it, but it can get you very used to having those super explosive like, elbows into that full rack. So that would be something I would put on there. Your footwork stays good. I like the squat stance you end up in. You can see on that clean from the floor that like you thought about it less than you did on the deadlift. Flows a little better.
Mm-hmm.
But really the same thing, slightly early pull and a little bit of like hesitation there. When you front squat, do you typically, like watching you come out of the squat, you see how like your butt like almost wants to want to lead the way and the torso comes down a little bit, like there? Does that happen to you when you front squat heavy?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like another, I think, place that you can just obviously working on strength is going to improve the clean, but another place that you can build a lot of confidence in that position too. Doing like pause front squats and like really focus on like I'm going to drive the elbows, and when I start to ascend, that like I'm going to stay tall and lead the way with my shoulders, and they'll feel hard. Like you'll all of a sudden be like that's so much heavier than it normally feels. Because the position's going to change a little bit, and like you're going to need more quad than hip and glute and hamstring. And then zombie squats when you don't hold the bar. You guys ever seen those?
Yeah.
Those are awesome too. The only thing I'll say about those is like I've caught myself doing this. Is I'll be zombie squatting and I should be straight out, and I'm like, ooh, it's getting heavy, and I start to do that. And I start to raise my hands because it kind of like pushes it back onto your shoulders and throat. So just making sure that you're staying very upright, that's a phenomenal drill too. But I think the strength it'll build there, and the fact that you're stopping yourself or you're doing the zombie squat, like as that strength builds, so will the confidence, I think, of getting through as well. Like you're a solid base versus like that little bit of like, not sure how this is gonna feel when I put it on my shoulders down there. Because that happens to me too. I have like that literal same thought sometimes. And then you do it and you're like, oh, that wasn't bad. Or you do it and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm done. It goes like two directions real fast. Let's sneak one more. Let's see. I think there's a couple elements to this. We won't do the entire thing today. We'll do, I think it's Jose's doing crossovers here. We'll look at those, and then we'll just talk about those a little bit, and then we'll save the job. Maybe it's just crossovers. Good, Jose. Jose's evidently pretty good.
Question.
Single
Do you
crossovers.
have, when you switch your hands, do you have to do like one down, one over, one down, one over in every rep, or there's no?
No, I have not seen that yet.
Okay.
That's a really good question to ask. because if I'm Dave Castro and Adrian Bosman, and I have introduced the single under crossover or the double under crossover, I don't personally think they'll do this with double under crossovers yet, but I think it would be a real fun game to put in the games to now require that, because when we look at the 10 general skills, time and time again, they're telling us that it's not all physical, that there's a huge neurological element in that.
Yeah.
So that's something that I think once you really, really have them down, we can move on to the next harder thing. And whether you choose to do double under crossover, I would probably address that first, but then eventually start to practice alternating arms.
That
That's
would
gonna be
be
really hard
so
to
hard
judge, by
to
the way.
judge. Yeah. Okay.
That would be that. Yeah, it would be tough to probably judge and look at. But at the same time, like if you're just counting the jumps and you go, I'm just gonna look for the left hand over the right arm every time. Like it's got to change. Like if you start to see the same one, then it's a problem. But I think that's like something like, are we ever gonna need it? Probably not. But it's like, are we ever gonna need freestanding handstand push-ups? Probably not. But if I can do those, damn well I'm really good on the wall or wall facing. So it'll improve like the simpler task too, neurologically. And then if you look at a history of of the CrossFit Games, like we have some obscure stuff like that. Like the year that there was the dumbbell clean and split jerk and the dumbbell snatch, that had to be opposite leg, opposite arm, alternating every time. You couldn't split with the same side every time. So like we have had some movements in history that require us to do that.
Watching this as well, it made me think of another question. Besides like being aesthetically pleasing, is there a benefit of keeping the feet together like Jose does? Like his looks so clean because he keeps his legs and feet together.
So let's talk about like jump in total. Like looking at Jose's jump, like because this is a crossover, like he's very, very focused on what's going on here, right? Well, let's say like this jump was just a single under or a double under. Like the jump is efficient in the sense they're together. If you ever watch someone and they're jumping, you can start to like see sometimes where they're inefficient or where they're not like balanced. And like you'll see people jump and one foot gets like oddly kicked out. And then like I just watched Hunter, the guy that did that push press, he redid the open WOD and his double unders were weird. Like he never, ever trips on dubs. And I was watching him jump because I was watching his feet because I was counting for him. But I noticed his feet, when he lands, the heels split out. So I know something's going on. And then I asked him afterward, I was like, what was up with your dubs today? And he was like, my right leg was cramped the entire time. So I think when you talk about like, is there an advantage to being like together and like synced? It probably one adds a hair of tension, but also I think it probably also helps like not accidentally like giving all the work to like, not all the work, but like more work to the left leg or like an imbalance in the jump that's happening there. That's what I would say with that. Because he's got jump overs here. Like imagine that he's favoring the right leg the whole time, and then he's got additional jumps, and then he's got eco bike. What's gonna blow up first? It's gonna be the side that's getting pushed and favored the whole time. So I would say that would be my answer there. But then you look at the actual jump, it's very like pikey, or not pikey, but yeah, pikey. Like the knees, like I would rather, eventually get more to like pogo stick versus like that tuck. Because like that's just more energy that's being used by going more into the tuck rather than like the pogo stick.
But
there's
also
gonna be knee flexion. I'm not saying that.
for crossovers, like I feel like you need a longer rope though. Because otherwise I'm doing that too,
Okay. This is good conversation. Longer rope. A lot of people cut the ropes long. And the reason why they do better on a longer rope are because inefficiencies in what's happening. Right. So if you have a longer rope on anything, but on like a crossover, you're gonna have more room for error as far as like moving the hands, and especially because you are moving your hands a lot. When you look at something like double under, you get people as they fatigue, they start to widen out. When you give them a shorter rope and they fatigue and their technique breaks down, they trip. Right. So it's very common for ropes to get cut too long.
Yeah.
for just us in the gym doing a WOD and doing a workout, it probably doesn't matter that much. Of course, we want to strive for that, the technique and the efficiency there. When we go to look at what just happened on 24.2, if you take somebody and their rope is too long, and you're now saying the row speed is relatively exactly the same, the deadlifts are unbroken, the transitions are pretty much the same because it could have become a transitional workout. If you've got that person that has that rope cut perfectly to where they jump and that rope hits the ground a couple inches in front of their feet, there's less drag as that rope circles through. Now it's a double under, so there's 2 times that it's hitting the ground per jump, right? Versus you have that person with a very long rope, and that rope hits a foot and a half in front of the feet, and now that rope's going to drag all the way through. It's going to give them a slower cycling time on those. So like when we look at stuff like that and like competition, I do want the person to get to the skill to where the rope's not going to have all this drag on the ground. Speaking that, like we are talking about competition and like the fact that a handful of reps were the difference between, you know, the first place guy and the 10th place guy. So, you know, it's a very small margin, but when you're looking at it and you're saying at that level, there's a lot of money on the line, like it could be a 10th of a second of why someone didn't get $310,000. So like when it comes to that, like that would be my answer there. Like, what is your want and need? And then what do you want to strive for? Because like it's really like it's just above the belly button that you're supposed to cut, and no one cuts the rope there because you need to be perfect when you do that.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So it's more of your level of technique and how much you have mastered it is going to depend on the length of the rope.
Yeah, and the longer rope's going to give you more lead room. What I recommend to people is start with a heavier rope before you start with a speed rope, because the heavier rope gives you more feedback and you can feel it, versus the speed rope really doesn't give you feedback and you can't feel the cable. So that would be more like my suggestion before someone goes and messes with a bunch of rope lengths and potentially could create bad habits. That's like the jump rope people's thing too. Like start with a heavier rope when you're learning dubs, and then as you get more skilled, you start to wean down to a speed rope. One thing I do love, and I like that it's paused here, is Jose has really good commitment when we're talking about the crossover of like those arms, like he commits to the cross. A lot of times when we're coaching, you'll see members and they kind of cross, and their cross is like not this big commitment, and they're here, and it doesn't give them a window to get through. So like the fact that I always say it's like if you were conducting an orchestra.
Yeah, he's like patient in a way too, to cross it all the way over and like not go off of it so quickly.
Not go like spastic. The one thing I'll say is like I don't love how wide his hands get here, because I feel like when he is gonna trip, it may be on the single part and not the crossover part, because the rope got shorter under him.
Makes sense.
The last thing I just want to say that is one of my favorite cues and works really well when you're either practicing or coaching crossovers. When you have the handle, we do double unders and singles. Where's the handle pointed? Always that way, right? It's always pointed toward the outside of us, and that's where the rope lies. When we cross it, we don't want to cross it and now point the rope that way. We want to cross it and point the rope still to the out. So when you cross, think about pointing your rope to the out, and then you go back to the out. So it's to the out, and that will give a really nice oval window to get through.
I think where that.
Try that next time you practice. Think about where the end of the rope is actually pointing. That was like the game.
That's probably what made me whip my left side so badly. Every time you make me, it's not like whipping myself, and it hurts. It's like a bitch.
That was the game changer, like cue I saw for crossovers that really like it took me from doing 3 or 4 to like
I am doing like this. I'm doing like this instead of keeping it that.
Yeah,
I keep repeating in my mind, hug yourself, hug yourself, hug yourself.
I think that's a really good one too. That's a great one. Yeah. And then like, you know, hugging yourself is that same like commitment that you would have. Yeah, crossovers is interesting because like I think we're still Like we have some people that coach them and coach them well, but they're like jump rope people, and a lot of coaches like that. Like all of a sudden, it's a new skill, not because it's learned, but it's also a new skill to coach.
Yeah.
So anytime you hear those little things, test them yourself or test them on an athlete. Like be curious about it. Anything else you guys want to throw on that?
No, I
How
just
do you
want to
progress to
say,
double?
huh?
How do I do a progression to double unders?
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh, I think because you mean do double under crossovers.
Oh, that move.
I have not done that yet. We still got to get some consistency. I would say
Nah.
maybe.
Forget about that.
I keep hitting myself. I know that I need to do practice and embrace that I'm gonna like learning double unders and hitting until I get it and unlock it. But
Having the
that's what I don't know how
commitment
to
that
go through.
like it's not going to be fun when I do practice.
Yeah.
I would say too, I would approach it like I haven't personally tried to do those yet because I'm still working on my consistency in just the crossover and quite honestly, then my consistency in double unders, like I still have good and bad days. I think I can always do them, but sometimes I'm like, I don't know what happened, and sometimes I'm like, I'm a stud. What I would say is I would approach like a double under crossover the same way I approach everything else. Like I would establish my double under and get that pattern going before I attempt to move my arms. And that's the same thing I do on a single. I establish my double under jump with a single. So everything's moving how it needs to move on the dub. And then I establish the 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So it's not like I just try to whip and go. Like I would find a rhythm and then I would go for that movement. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Jose, now it's up to you to try.
It's
We're
funny
all
how
still working on the other one.
funny how the things that you see in people trying to do like even single unders and double unders, it gets back to you if you want to learn something again. Because I'm like, hey, relax your shoulders because you're making the length shorter every time that you're like this. So relax it. And when I want to try it, I was like, I'm also like, okay, here it goes. And then
When you
make the
become
same
aware of it,
mistake.
it's really hard to break. And like not just the length, but like this last open WOD was not an arm workout. My arms were dying. They were so blown up on this last workout. And it's because I was so tense on the double under. And then like I didn't lose tension on the other two movements. So it just over 20 minutes, it accumulated and it killed me to the end because my dubs started falling apart even worse because I was so tense. So like when we talk about efficiency and moving, like you should be relaxed. Like you don't want to be burning unnecessary energy with your shoulders being crazy. So that's a really good thing to relay to people and teach too. I think that comes once you got your movement down though. That's hard to try to learn the movement and get it down while thinking of those other things. It doesn't go well, I think, with too much thought. All right, I don't got anything else. You guys got anything else you want to add before we call it a day?
I think that was like the overall theme of today's call. It's like not
Relax.
overthinking and relaxing.
I mean, yeah.
Right.
With most of our movements, that would have helped, I think, a little bit. Same thing with coaching. Have confidence in yourself. You've been doing it a while. Relax. Let yourself know what you've learned. You're still going to make mistakes. You're just growing slowly for sure. All right. I'll see you SoFlo guys. I'll see y'all tomorrow night. And I'll see the rest of you guys Tuesday night.
Okay.
Or Tuesday day, not night. Normal time.
Okay.
All right,
Okay, see you there.
Bye,
See you
guys.
guys.